Aviation faces a sobering reality. Our carbon budget is rapidly depleting and could be exhausted by 2032. This isn't speculation, this is a carbon countdown. In our new book, Sustainability in the Air, Volume 2, Dirk Singer and I document how dramatically the landscape has transformed since our first book came out 18 months ago. We've witnessed a shift from bold experimentation to disciplined execution. What makes this book essential? We reveal how sustainable solutions succeed not because they are green, but because they are better, economically superior. The winners aren't those with the most advanced technology. They are those solving the right problems with compelling economic advantages. From SAF production and contrail mitigation to direct air capture, we have distilled hard-won lessons into a practical roadmap for aviation's journey to net zero. Get your copy today. Link in the show notes.
You should manage uncertainty. You should not try to minimize uncertainty. I think that actively taking on some uncertainty, heading in a certain direction, and allowing for risk, that's a sign of company health. Like, that's a sign that you're actively learning. The Darwin quote is, it's not the strongest that survive or the most intelligent. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change. And we've never been afraid to make changes and experiment at Heart. And I think that's a recipe for our success.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Anders Forslund. Anders is the founder and CEO of Heart Aerospace. Heart was recently in the news because they decided to move their operations from Sweden to the Los Angeles area in the US, including letting go of their entire Swedish team. Now, as you would know, avid listeners could tell from the show, this is not the first time Anders is coming on the show. He has been on the show and has been featured also in both of our books as well. So what's changed? Is Heart a new company? Why the transplant from Sweden to the US? What is different? Why the team change to a lot of new hires from Tesla and SpaceX? What is the new production methodology? We have a no-holds-barred discussion with Anders just in time for Paris Air Show, and you heard it first on Sustainability in the Air. Enjoy. Anders, welcome back to Sustainability in the Air. This is the second time you are on the podcast. You were in our first book. You were also in our second book, the only company to have made the book both the times. Yet, you let go of your entire Swedish team and are starting over in the Los Angeles area. This is radical. Let's start with the obvious question, why? What was it that the US has that the Sweden and EU weren't offering?
First of all, I'm delighted to be here. I'm glad I'm coming on a second time, and also thank you for including us in both your books. So we're big fans of what you're doing. But back to the question. So first of all, we're not starting over. In the LA and our R&D center has been open for about a year. We're scaling rapidly. We have our origins in the US. We started, through YC in Silicon Valley, and we've always been planning to produce aircraft in the US, given the fact that we have, our customers there, and the largest aerospace market in the world. But what has changed is obviously that with that commitment to focus on the US, we've moved out of Sweden. And, as a Swede, it's not a decision that I've taken lightly. And I think we do a good job outlining that in the press release. We're flight testing in the US, so why build an aircraft in Sweden? We have our anchor customers there. We have our key suppliers there. We have a lot of our investors there. And all of those things are true. But there's also some reasons beyond that, and which I thought it'd actually be great to come on your show to talk about. And it's that product development has changed drastically in the last 10 years. And as an aerospace company today, I think unless you're adapt to those changes, you will struggle to be successful in the 21st century. So I wanted to come on here, share those lessons learned with your listeners. I think it can be really valuable information, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But yeah, to get back to your question, I think Sweden was this great place to start. But if you're scaling and working on along these new principles, the best place in the world to build that kind of company is in the LA ecosystem.
Very interesting. What you're telling me is what got you here won't get you there. You have to do things differently in the next stage of development of the company.
Yeah, that's it.
But Heart is now years into development. I was lucky enough to visit you in Gothenburg late last year, see the airplane in the flesh or in the metal. I was very impressed by what I saw. I was very impressed speaking with your customer advisory board members and how excited they were. Yet, there is no first flight yet. I know you have delayed your demonstrator flight. Why is that? What do you say to those who say, these guys are just pushing the timelines out? Is this something important for a startup? What's your answer to that?
Well, I mean, so first of all, I think we're this stuff is hard, right? So what we've done is we've rolled out an aircraft. We've gone through a lot of the different stages of testing, and when we get to flight test, I think we will have done that. We've spent we spent some money on it. We spent some time on it, but I think when you're looking back on it, we will probably get there for substantially less spend than any other aircraft program in recent history. I mean, at least for the size of the aircraft we're building. But anyway, I don't want to get too cocky about that before we fly. I will say that I'm just proud of what we've achieved so far. But it's also to say, I think that I'm proud but not content. Right? This is one of my catchphrases. But when we've spent over $100 million to get to here, and if we were to spend that money today, we would have the plane in the air for a lot less. Right? And when we're building our successor aircraft to the X1 called the X2, we will spend a lot less money on that scope that we today spent $100 million on. But I think that's just the nature of creative work. So when you're doing something that has never been done before, when you're building an electric plane, you're using that money to build knowledge. So you start testing different things. So my dad used to be in the military, and he was at the start of the war, you attack from many different fronts and you see what works. You see where you're meeting resistance. You see where you can make significant gains. And when you see what works, that's where you divert your troops. That's where you divert your resources. And you do that exercise continuously as you're learning new things. And Heart, we tried a lot of different approaches, but we baselined around a product development model that wasn't too revolutionary because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We said we wanted to build a state-of-the-art aerospace company for our first aircraft. We learn all the rules, and on our second aircraft, we see what rules we need to challenge. But to me, it's just become increasingly clear that old method, let's call it the 21st century product development model, is not working today. And if you're going to places like Paris and you're speaking to people across the industry, it seems more and more that everyone, whether they're a legacy OEM, a supplier, customers like airlines, or even the startups, everybody's coming to this realization that something needs to change in how we do things.
Now, I hear you, and I'm going to hold that thought because we're going to revisit what changed in product development. But before we get into product development, you've actually called the aviation sector is obsessed with paperwork over product. But the reality is, these are flying machines. You need the paperwork for certification. how do you meet the strong safety requirements of regulators if you want to cut paperwork? How do you balance both of these things?
So actually, so what I did, if I could sort of, I started, when we started looking at how to do product development differently, we kind of listed 7 different things, 7 different rules or 7 different pillars that we wanted to do differently. And one of them, actually, rule number 4 is around quality. And that's sort of where it's a little bit of my home base. I did my PhD on robust design and quality practices. And I had a professor early on that told me this story that stuck with me. And it's the story about the plane and the pile. He said that if you take an aircraft, any commercial aircraft, and you take all the paperwork, all the documentations that gone into building that aircraft, and you print that paper out, and you stack those papers next to the aircraft, the stack, if you weigh that stack, it should weigh more than the weight of the aircraft. He said, if you do that, then you know you've done it right. So for an aircraft that weighs 20 tons, you need to produce 20 tons of paper. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I've like a story of the value of a good documentation. But then I thought, like, who knows what's in these papers? Who is like internalizing what's in these paper? Who are they for? And also, like, well, while the aircraft weighs 20 tons, good engineering practice would be to make sure that there's not a gram there that's not supposed to be there. Like that there's, that everything is there is adding strength and not weight, right? So, and I think the same is true for documentation, right? Like, so like less is more. Like, obviously you should document everything that you need to document. Just like an aircraft structure needs to have like a good strength to weight ratio. Your documentation needs to have a really good signal to noise ratio. Like, it's more like writing documentation is more like writing computer code. It's like a good algorithm should do the thing you want without taking up too much compute.
Right.
So, and especially today, generating 20 tons of paperwork, which sounded like a daunting task when I heard this story first time. I mean, today it's just a few ChatGPT prompts away, basically. So, like, I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to build a safe aircraft.
Okay, I hear you. Now, in the past year, in our chats, you've shared with me, actually, I've met some of your teammates. You've now got a CTO from SpaceX. You've got senior executives from Tesla, and you have people from way outside of aviation.
Yeah.
And aviation veterans will tell you, you know what, this industry is different. So who's right and who's wrong? Tell me why this new team from, well, I would say technology giants from outside of aviation, and why not go with your earlier approach of tried and tested? I think you had a huge team from Embraer who built the E2. These guys had done it before.
Yeah.
Why the big shift? Because that's the other shift you have done.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that what we're getting at here is, so first of all, I've had great teams of coming from inside and outside of aerospace, and I think that everybody's bringing a lot of important experience to the table. But I think it's the biggest challenge we have today in the aerospace industry, if you take it broadly, and this actually goes back to one of my 7 rules. 7th rule, actually, the final rule is, how do we turn the talent tide? The most, like, when you're not building an aircraft, like this industry, we haven't built a clean sheet aircraft in a decade. And it's very unclear, even looking into the future, what the next aircraft is going to be. So, like, how are you going to be attracting the right talent to join the cost? Because you don't really have a cost, right? And I've seen outside that mission-driven companies that are outside of commercial aerospace, they are attracting all the top talent. Where does the talent go from MIT? Where does it go from Stanford? Where does it go from other top schools? Well, if you're a high performer and you want to do stuff, you rather go build a rocket, with the mission of trying to go to Mars, where you actually get to build something, launch rockets every month. You will also, be well compensated. You have good stock options. Or you can go to commercial aerospace, where I think it's unclear really what even the mission is. And like, what is it that we're offering to the talent pool? And I think the best way to attract talent is to build something that actually flies. So I think we really need to get off this sort of high horse that is, aerospace experience. Like today, in this day and age, you can have, 1 or 2 decades of aerospace experience without ever having built a clean sheet aircraft. Like if you're ever working in the turboprop markets, it's 40 years since, the world has any, last experience of building a clean sheet aircraft. So I think like getting that outside help, I think is going to be crucial if we want to really get anything done.
Very, very interesting. And I'm all eyes and ears to see how this pans out. But you're not just challenging the aircraft, you're challenging how it's built.
Yeah.
Isn't vertical integration, especially in aerospace, going to dramatically increase cost and timelines? And can you, as a young startup, afford that?
I think that a high level of vertical integration is the most efficient way to run aerospace companies. And actually, that's part of my rule number 6 is verticalization. And like if you go back in time, in the time where we were building a lot of aircraft, when the industry was building a lot of aircraft, companies were much more vertically integrated. That used to be the norm. And I think if you even want to sort of understand why it is the way it is today, I think today is kind of an anomaly. I think it starts because you had this outsourcing boom that came in the late 90s. I think as the new programs became fewer and fewer, it was too prohibitive to retain the know-how. Like
right.
So,
and Boeing led the way, right, with the 787 development.
But it was like a company. Say you're at like Fokker, and you've gone through building like the Fokker 50 and these aircraft, and you really recognize, okay, we don't have enough program, like we don't have enough new programs to sort of keep all our entire engineering workforce busy. So we're going to focus on the things we do best, which is say landing gear, and then you specialize in that, and then you get on some other program, and so which that makes smart because then you just start keeping the repetitions, you're getting the reps in. But in the last, like that's all well, right? Because I think, but once we're not building any aircraft at all, like when we start not building any new planes at all, this is when that sort of thinking starts breaking down. So there's really only 2 methods for like building cost-effective things at high quality. Either you have a very current domain expertise, of having worked at programs that are very similar in very recent time, and you can sort of extrapolate those learnings into a new program. But since new programs are becoming increasingly rare, or you can start from the top level, from the first principle, the aircraft level knowledge, working yourself down to the component level. And that gives you sort of the full understanding, the full context of the problem you're trying to solve, the requirements that you're trying to meet. So I think that is why I think a supply chain, that very entangled supply chain that we have today, which are tiers and tiers of different specialists, is becoming increasingly just unruly and fragmented as it's not really being used for building planes. So the best way,
this is interesting, but I need to push you back on that because one of the things that impressed me the most in all the interviews we have done, all the chats I've had with your teams over the last 3 years, is that you managed to successfully bring in this team from Embraer who had rolled out the E2, which was the last successfully rolled out models, right? So you had this going for you, yet you've turned 90 degrees and said, all right, you know what? I don't want the commercial aviation knowledge, but instead let's get the technology expertise. Isn't that risky?
Yeah, I think that the big difference is that the risk profile, and first of all, like that team is great, and I think they pushed a lot of great, push the envelope. I think it's never been. It's only one of the most successful programs that they've been in terms of like engineering management, and I've certainly learned a lot from working with that team. And I mean, I can speak a lot more to it, but what I will say is that when you're bringing a hybrid electric aircraft to market. It is different than bringing a sort of something that's in the old propulsion paradigm to market. So the level of innovation that you have to bring on, the level of is so vastly different from what you're doing if you're building a regional plane, and so the redesigns are not going to be, you can't avoid redesigns. That's going to be the norm. So you need to you need to bring it, and also it's like, I think it's about, I think the right program mix in an aircraft company is, in a startup company, is about 1/3 of the team should be coming from commercial aerospace. 1/3 of the team should be coming from, understanding the technology that you're trying, like for every new startup, there's understanding the industry that you're in, that you're trying to disrupt, understanding the technology that you're bringing in. What is the technology that you use to try to disrupt that industry? And the third one is, how do you scale teams from, going from 0 to, a few hundred people or 1,000 people? How do you raise, $1 billion, all of that stuff? These are the three skills that you need to know. There's nobody, you can never find a candidate, somebody to work with that knows all three perfectly, because you're doing something that's never been done. But what I see is that, so you could look at that and you can say, hey, electrification is just, it's a change of propulsion system. So if you look at the car industry, you have, a lot of the legacy automakers that just looked at electrification as this add-on, this change of propulsion system. They were not really able to design a competitive product, highly efficient product, a product that had a lot of margins on sales, etc. It's only when you start going in and designing the product from scratch for that propulsion system, that's when you start building a product that has a competitive advantage. So I think you've seen that as sort of the Tesla and the Rivians versus the Fords, right, etc. And I think for electrification, the beautiful thing about electrification is that it is like electric motors are a commoditizable part. So it becomes more about the software that controls it. And then you start seeing that, hey, the really good electric car companies are the ones that they're working like software companies, right? So that's the change you need to do in order to bring in a propulsion system that arguably, has elements of being simpler, but also has, more complexity, and building a product that is extremely, that is meeting the value proposition that you're selling the aircraft for.
Fair enough. I love that you brought in the car analogy right now. I had one of the early models of the Tesla, and I loved how it was such a big car on software rather than just hardware. You've told me once that aircraft today are computer with wings, yet most aerospace companies still behave like hardware shops from the 1970s or 60s, depending on which one you're talking about. How's Heart actually behaving now like a software company rather than just a hardware company?
Yeah. So I think, going back to these rules that we have, is like software is number 5. And so first of all, I think it's really important to recognize that all aerospace OEMs are software companies. They might not be behaving like it, but they are. And I can tell you why. Is because the problem space in aerospace today is almost entirely software. So let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean, the most planes today, they crash today not because of a broken wing, but because of broken logic, because of some software, right? So the software that's generally also been the thing that delayed the program. It's not that the design rings wrong; it's that the flight control system is uncertifiable or something like that. Like I looked this up, and for like all the 10 latest major aircraft programs, all had delays of more than a year that could be attributed to software. And it's also causing a lot of problems at the gate, right? And the software is also linked to the problems that we're having today with air traffic management. So if the problem space of what we're trying to solve for today is largely software, then the solution space should be largely software as well. So that's why I think that aerospace companies are software companies. They're not just great software companies. So, for instance, like today, aerospace companies tend to outsource most of their software stack. For like a narrow body airline, it can contain something like 1,000 different LRUs. And about half of those are like simply control boxes that just do send software signals in and out. And they buy these from 100 different vendors. And then they put like 30 miles of wire in there to connect the boxes. And this could be done differently. It can be done with a vastly fewer number of boxes, with less wiring, and with a software stack that's controlled in-house. And that's exactly the revolution we've seen in new space. That's exactly the revolution we've seen in the car industry. And it's increasingly what we're seeing also in the new defense industry. So
going forward, then, is Heart a software company, a hardware company, or both?
Even hardware, even hardware is software, right? Like even hardware, it might be, the hardware is designed on software. It's being manufactured by machines that are programmable. So I think that the people that really succeeded to commoditize hardware are the software companies. Like the most advanced hardware that's being built in the world right now are electronics. I mean, these are things that are built in like the nanoscale. And because it's software engineers that are designing that hardware and building that hardware, they've absolutely commoditized it and made it basically free. Right. So I think that it sort of kind of sets a good reference or a good bar of where we could be in aerospace.
Right. No, it's good to get this insight from behind, right?
This is really how our team in LA got started. So we've really hired some of the people that build the software stack, the autopilot on, say, Tesla, and people coming from the Rivian team. A lot of people coming from SpaceX, where they build a software stack on the Starship and the Falcon 9, including our CTO Ben, who led some of the teams that build those software. So, like the things that we have running in the lab now, I think are really exciting to be showing off in the future.
I'm looking forward to those to outsiders. You have given me a lot of insight right now. To outsiders, all of this put together looks like a pivot. You've moved from Sweden to Los Angeles. You've got new hires, a software play, maybe even a shift in focus. How's the Heart today different from the Heart a year ago?
Well, I think that, like, first of all, I mean, I don't know. Others can be the judge if it's a major pivot. I think that if you follow the company from the start, and we've never been afraid to make changes, right? So I think changes is how you manage risk. And actually, one of these rules that I'm going back to is, like, my rule number 2 is, you should manage uncertainty. You should not try to minimize uncertainty. I think that actively taking on some uncertainty, heading in a certain direction, and allowing for risk, that's a sign of company health. Like, that's a sign that we're actively learning. Today, we live in a super chaotic world. The world is changing. In the short history of the company, we've seen zero interest rates. We've seen environments where there was zero interest rates. We've seen SPAC crazes. We've seen a clean tech bubble. We've seen pandemic. We've seen major political shift. We've seen, sort of 2 wars that have diverted a lot of, the attention towards defense. So I think it's not really and also I've seen a lot of my peer companies, other founders that I really respect have gone out of business. So I don't think that it's the strongest, like the Darwin quote is, it's not the strongest that survive or the most intelligent. It's the ones that are most adaptable to change. And we've never been afraid to make changes and experiment at Heart. And I think that's a recipe for our success.
Well said. And I can see you're adapting and adapting fast, and that's why it might look dizzying from the outside. You've done a PhD, so you know the importance of sticking it out and just grit, right? What is the one lesson you've learned the hard way that no amount of aerospace theory could have prepared you for?
So I've been thinking about this a lot. I guess Well, I mean, first of all, like, what are the key learnings? So we learn new things every day, and one of the things I've learned is that it's really, as much as it is about learning, it's even more important about teaching. So, when I came out, like starting, this company, coming out of academia, I was a bit like self-conscious of, being the guy that's coming from the ivory tower and, professing some grand theory. And you have like the people that have been on the front lines for decades, and you're like, hey, let's do it this way because I read it in a book, right? So I was originally a bit deferential to the people that had field experience, and I think that's all good. There's, listening, learning, there's good qualities, but I think now we're at a place where I feel like, okay, we've earned our stripes, we've shown what we're capable, and now we can actually start speaking out and like teaching. And so one of the things that I think is the most important thing to do as a leader is to spend a lot of time communicating the vision. What are my core convictions? What is good product development? And it's sort of articulating that well is the unlock to so much, finding the right collaborators, the right partners, the right team. Like, people need to know very clearly what I stand for, what Heart stands for. Even as we're changing a lot, like, what are the core convictions? And then they could choose whether to believe in that or not. And I think then we'll sort of get the right, people on our side. And not to say that people shouldn't be challenging me or what we're having, but on that sort of, there should be a North Star that should be clearly marked, and it should be evangelized over and over again until, people that are working in the company can sing it in their sleep.
Fair enough. I love the teaching angle here. That came as a surprise. I had not expected that. Sure, I'll take it from you. While a lot of things have changed, one thing that has remained constant is your focus on the regional aviation market.
Yeah.
Now, in the grand scheme of things, regional aviation is small and marginal. Yet, your company is entirely focused on rethinking regional aviation. Are you going to keep to that focus? Why is this so important to you?
No, I think the loss. So, I mean, I love regional aviation. I think it plays such an important role, and it's also like this important entry point for a startup. So, my thoughts around this is like, first of all, I think the loss of regional connectivity has been the canary in the coal mine that there's something wrong in the industry. Regional is upstream of everything, right? So it is, in the sort of our route maps, it's the tributaries that are feeding the rivers. I think it's in the critical path. It's the planes where we train our new pilots to then fly our larger aircraft, our narrow bodies, and our wide bodies. And I think in the sort of aerospace ecosystem, it's where the new players are being born. It's where new technology is introduced and should be introduced. It's kind of where Embraer and Bombardier got their start. So I wouldn't, it's the obvious place to start. It's, in the sort of product development lingo, it's the blue ocean market where there's not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of new products, and you can sort of build from there. Obviously, we're looking to build larger aircraft at one point, but going straight to like a narrow body aircraft, I think, is a tall order.
Indeed. Okay, makes sense. Step one. So this is step one. But if 10 years from now, okay, looking out in the future, if Heart succeeds and is a huge success, what changes will there be in the industry? What does the new era of aviation actually look like to you?
Man, I actually, I don't think too much about that. That's my answer.
Maybe you're 10 years on the present.
Yeah. No, I mean, I when we started, there were so many companies, or there was so many that were trying to predict 2050. And I think those people that were trying to predict 2050 are not even predicting 2030 right, or let alone 2025. So I've been here for like half a decade now, and I don't think it's about a crystal ball. I think it's about the. Well, I love what what, Jeff Bezos did when he started selling books on the internet, and people were like, why will people buy books? There's the internet. Isn't this like a legacy product? Why are you focused on that? And he was like, well, we know three things that are core principles. We know that people want, to be able to buy more things. We know that, or have a larger selection of products. We know that they want the lowest price on the products. And we know that they want the fastest shipping. So, and I think we can look at aerospace and say, a lot of things are going to change in the technology, hopefully. But some things are going to stay the same. I think that airlines will want to be able to buy aircraft that are affordable. I think they want those aircraft as fast as possible. Cheaper is going to be better. Faster is going to be better. I think the customer is going to want to fly, from as conveniently as possible. Just like Amazon's convenient. I think, having better connectivity is better than having worse connectivity. So yeah, if you build an aircraft that, if you're just leaning to the places of like, where can we get the large bang for buck on reducing program cost, COGS cost, if you're looking at, where can we bring in connectivity where it has, and where can we improve the market and get the biggest bang for buck? What's the market missing right now? If you're focusing on those things and building those pillars, you don't actually have to have the crystal ball. You don't have to see what the future look like. So I think we spend too much time on that sort of long-term vision for 2050, and too little time on just being on the shop floor building things.
Let's be on the shop floor building things then.
That's right. Yeah.
I wish you all the best, Anders. I know this has been a year of big, bold moves, and everyone from the outside may not always know what's going on the inside. I have spoken to not one but multiple customers of yours who have ordered planes since the changes, and most of them still exude confidence in your ability to revolutionize regional aviation to begin with. And from what I've heard from the team I've met, I am confident that, if you continue focusing one step at a time, hopefully this will yield some good results. I'm very curious about this 7-step process, by the way, and I'm sure we'll be releasing a few assets in the future.
I've been plugging that more about here. Those. Yeah.
Exactly. No, thank you very much, and all the best for the Paris Air Show.
Yeah, and thank you, Shashank. I'll meet you there, and I hope we'll let me know if we spark some discussions. I think it would be really exciting. I hope we should, as I said on the start of this, I think, starting to get people talking and challenging some of the norms and assumptions about how we're doing things. I think that should be part of the goal of sort of opening up the discussion. I think you've done such a great job with that, and Dirk as well. So always delighted to come on the show.
Thank you, Anders. And thanks for being very open and taking us behind the scenes. We really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simpliflying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simpliflying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our Supervising Editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Mira Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Lihia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimain is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying, and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.